My name is Brianna, and I'm 28 years old. The day my own family tossed me out like garbage was the day I swore they'd regret every second of it. I grew up thinking family meant love, protection, and loyalty, but the people I called family only ever made me feel small. My mother, Denise, had remarried when I was 16, and her new husband, Roger, came with a daughter named Kendra, 2 years younger than me but 100 times more entitled. From the moment she walked into our lives, everything changed. Suddenly, I was the outsider in my own home. Kendra was everything my mother seemed to adore: pretty, popular, fake to the bone. She could do no wrong even when she was wrong. Me? I was the problem. I worked 2 jobs, helped pay bills, kept the house clean, and still got blamed for every little thing that went missing or went wrong. Roger never spoke much to me, but when he did, it was always something cutting, like he wanted to remind me I wasn't his child. I still tried to please them. Every paycheck, I'd hand over part of my earnings to my mother for groceries or rent, even when she never asked Kendra for a dime. I told myself things would get better if I just kept being the good daughter. But I was fooling myself. The final blow came one Thursday night. I'd just finished a long shift at the diner, feet aching, uniform stained with coffee, and when I pulled into the driveway, my heart froze. All my things, clothes, photos, books, even my old laptop were stuffed into garbage bags and piled by the curb. It took me a second to even process what I was looking at. The porch light was on, and through the window, I could see them sitting at the kitchen table like it was just another normal evening. My mother didn't even flinch when she saw me. She stepped outside and said, coldly, "You need to leave, Brianna. We can't have thieves living under our roof." At first, I laughed, thinking it was some sick joke. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Then she said it. Kendra told her I'd been stealing money from her purse. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's not true," I said, my voice trembling. But she wasn't listening. Roger opened the door wider, like he couldn't wait to see me gone. "You should be ashamed," he muttered. "We gave you everything." I wanted to scream. Everything? They'd taken everything: my peace, my dignity, my sense of belonging. But the words got stuck in my throat. Kendra appeared behind them, her lips curled into that smug little smile I'd come to hate. She didn't even bother to hide it. That's when I knew this was her doing another one of her games. Only this time, she'd won. It started to rain as I dragged my bags toward my car. The cold soaked through my clothes, and every step felt heavier than the last. I sat in the driver's seat, water dripping from my hair, and stared at the house I'd once called home. Not one person came out to stop me, not even my mother. That realization hurt more than anything. I drove aimlessly for hours, ending up in a dimly lit parking lot outside a 24-hour store. That's where I spent the night, sitting in my car, wrapped in a thin blanket, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. The smell of wet trash still clung to my clothes from those bags, and I kept thinking, is that really all I am to them? Trash? But somewhere between exhaustion and heartbreak, something inside me hardened. I didn't know how or when, but I made myself a silent promise. They'd regret this. They'd regret every cruel word, every time they made me feel worthless. Because 3 days later, when they discovered what I'd really been doing with my time, everything changed. I didn't know it yet, but the truth about my double life was about to destroy their fake perfect world. When I woke up that morning in my car, my neck stiff and eyes swollen from crying, I felt completely lost. I didn't even know what day it was anymore. My phone buzzed with messages, none from my mother or anyone who cared, just spam and bank alerts reminding me of my low balance. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. If they thought tossing me out would break me, they had no idea who I really was. For months before that night, I had been quietly building something they never knew about. Every night after my shifts, I'd spend hours in my room working on a small online business I'd started from scratch. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I designed handmade jewelry and sold it under the brand name Luna Rise Designs. It started as a hobby, but slowly, people began buying from me. I never told my family because I knew they'd laugh or call it a waste of time. They always said I should get a real job, even though I already worked harder than any of them. When I got kicked out, I thought it was the end of everything, but in a strange way, it was freedom. I didn't have to hide my dreams anymore. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town that rented by the week. The room smelled of bleach and loneliness, but it had Wi-Fi, a desk, and just enough space for me and my laptop. I told myself, if this is where I have to start over, then so be it. Those next few days were a blur of exhaustion and determination. I barely ate. I'd wake up early, sketch designs, pack orders, and film short videos showcasing my work. One night, while editing a video, I decided to record a personal story not about my family, but about how I'd lost everything and was starting again with nothing but hope. I didn't plan to post it, but something in me said, do it. So I did. I uploaded it to my small business account, where I barely had 200 followers. The video was just me, sitting on the motel bed, talking about chasing dreams even when no one believes in you. I ended it by saying, sometimes being thrown away is the best thing that can happen to you because that's when you find yourself. I went to sleep thinking nothing of it. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was blowing up. Notifications, messages, shares, thousands of them. The video had gone viral overnight. People from all over were leaving comments like, "You're an inspiration." And I needed to hear this today. I sat there in disbelief, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Within 2 days, Lunarize Designs had gained over 50,000 followers. Orders were pouring in faster than I could fill them. Even a few brands reached out, offering to collaborate. My small dream had suddenly exploded into something real. It was overwhelming but beautiful. And while I was celebrating quietly in that little motel room, I didn't realize what was happening back at home. Because my video had my face, my name, and enough clues for people to connect the dots. I hadn't hidden my identity, I didn't need to, but to my family, that meant the world now knew who they really were. That night, as I was packaging bracelets and earrings under the dim motel light, my phone rang. The screen flashed, "Mom." My chest tightened. I hadn't expected to hear from her again so soon. I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering, my voice barely steady. "Hello?" On the other end, her tone was soft, too soft. "Brianna," she said, "we saw your video." And that was the moment I realized my success had just become their worst nightmare. By the time my mother called me, her voice was dripping with fake concern I could see right through. She started the conversation as if nothing had happened. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked, pretending she hadn't tossed my life into the trash 3 days earlier. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing bitterly. Her tone was soft, almost motherly, but I'd learned long ago that softness from her usually meant manipulation was coming next. "I'm fine," I said flatly, "just working." "Oh, that's good," she replied quickly. "We saw your video. You look nice in it." There was an awkward pause, and I could hear Kendra whispering something in the background. My stomach twisted. I could picture her perfectly, probably rolling her eyes and pacing behind Mom, furious that I was getting attention she didn't control. "People are talking about you everywhere," Mom continued, her voice turning lighter. "Even the neighbors mentioned it. You've gone viral. Isn't that exciting?" It hit me then this wasn't concern. It was curiosity wrapped in false affection. They weren't proud of me. They wanted to know how much money I was making, what opportunities I was getting, and how they could insert themselves into it. I stayed calm, responding with one-word answers, giving them nothing to work with. Then, suddenly, the phone shifted, and I heard Kendra's sharp voice. "Bree, it's Kendra. I think you should tell people I helped you with your designs. You know, since I gave you that necklace idea last year?" I nearly laughed. "You mean the one you said was stupid?" She went quiet for a second, then tried to recover. "Well, I just think it would look good for both of us if you mentioned me. We could even do a collaboration. People love sister stories." That word sister made my blood boil. "Kendra, we're not sisters," I said coldly. "And I don't owe you anything." She scoffed. "Wow, ungrateful much? We let you live with us for years," my patience snapped. You threw me out, Kendra. Remember that? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Finally, I said, I have to go, and hung up before they could twist the knife any further. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. That call reminded me exactly who they were and why I couldn't let them drag me down again. Over the next few days, my story continued to spread. I started getting messages from strangers telling me how my words had helped them leave toxic homes, bad marriages, and suffocating jobs. It was surreal. People saw me as strong, inspiring the very things my family tried to convince me I wasn't. I didn't mention them publicly. I didn't need to. My silence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Then, late one night, I got a DM from someone with no profile picture. It said, "Hey, I think you should see this." Attached was a photo me, standing in the rain that night. My trash bags piled by the curb behind me. The caption read, "Family kicks out daughter, throws her things away now she's famous." My heart stopped. Someone from my old neighborhood must have taken that photo. It was circulating everywhere. People were furious, calling out my family in the comments, demanding answers. I sat there, staring at the screen, my pulse racing. I hadn't planned on exposing them, but now the world had done it for me. The hypocrisy, the cruelty, the betrayal, all of it was laid bare for everyone to see. As much as I wanted to distance myself from the drama, a small, guilty satisfaction crept in. For once, the truth wasn't hidden behind their lies. For once, they couldn't twist the story to make me the villain. And I knew, deep down, that the photo was just the beginning of their downfall. The photo that hit the internet exposed the very people who had once humiliated me. By morning, it was everywhere, reposted, shared, dissected by strangers who didn't even know me but could still see the cruelty in that single frozen moment. My mother's house was unmistakable in the background, her porch light glowing faintly as if trying to hide its guilt. The image had gone viral on every platform I used to promote my business. Thousands of comments flooded in. "Who does that to their own child? This is heartbreaking. She deserves better." I didn't post it. I didn't even know who did. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling like karma had finally punched through the walls of that house. Within hours, my mother's Facebook profile was filled with angry comments. People recognized her face from old family posts and connected the dots. Someone even dug up screenshots of Kendra bragging about her perfect life and contrasted it with my story. The internet was relentless. Every lie they'd told about being this loving, close-knit family was crumbling right in front of everyone's eyes. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A few journalists reached out asking for an interview, but I turned them all down. I didn't want to become famous for pain. I just wanted peace. Around noon, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I hesitated before answering, knowing exactly what kind of storm was coming. "Brianna," she snapped the moment I said hello. "You need to tell people that photo is fake. Do you hear me? We're being harassed." I closed my eyes. "Mom, I didn't post it, and it's not fake." She paused, then lowered her tone. "Please, baby. You know how the internet can be. People are losing their minds over nothing. Can't you just post something, say it was misunderstood?" "Misunderstood?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "You threw me out, Mom. You literally dumped my life in the trash. What exactly did they misunderstand?" In the background, I heard Kendra crying dramatic, exaggerated sobs. "She ruined everything, Mom. They're calling me a scammer." "Scammer?" I asked quietly, my heart suddenly pounding. My mother tried to shush her, but Kendra kept going. "They found my business page. People are saying I sell fake products. They're posting reviews, tagging me everywhere." I hung up before she could finish. My head was spinning. So this was it, the beginning of their unraveling. Their reputation, their fake perfect image, the world they'd built by. Tearing me down, all of it was collapsing. That night, I sat in my motel room, the glow of my laptop reflecting on the walls, and thought about how strange justice could be. I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't even spoken publicly about what they did. Yet somehow, the truth had clawed its way into the light all on its own. Still, a small part of me felt uneasy. I didn't like seeing people ripped apart online, even if they deserved it. I knew how quickly sympathy could turn to mockery, how ruthless the internet could be. But another part of me, the part that had spent years swallowing humiliation in silence, felt something else: relief. Maybe even vindication. The next morning, I woke up to another flood of notifications. Someone had sent me a screenshot of Kendra's latest post, a long, tearful apology. She claimed the whole incident was a misunderstanding and that she loved her sister deeply. Her words dripped with dishonesty, and the comments section saw right through it. People called her out instantly. Every excuse she made only made things worse. My hands trembled slightly as I set my phone down. I knew my family too well. They weren't apologizing because they regretted what they'd done. They were apologizing because they'd been exposed. I took a deep breath, stood up, and looked in the mirror. The tired, broken girl from a week ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who didn't need their approval anymore. Because what they didn't know was that I still had one secret left, one that could ruin them completely. That secret was buried deep in a flash drive I'd hidden long before they threw me out. I didn't mean to keep it as blackmail. At first, it was just insurance, something to protect myself from the chaos Kendra always created. She'd been running her influencer account long before she turned 20, acting like a self-made businesswoman. But behind that screen was nothing but lies, and I knew them all. Back then, Kendra begged me to help manage her brand. She wasn't good with technology, so I handled her emails, her sponsors, and even some of her fan interactions. I didn't realize until months in that she was scamming people, selling products she never shipped, taking money for fake giveaways, and deleting messages when people complained. When I confronted her, she laughed and said, "It's just business. Everyone does it." I was disgusted. I saved everything: screenshots, receipts, DMs, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew someday she'd drag me into one of her messes. When I left home, that little flash drive was one of the few things I grabbed before the rain ruined everything else. It sat at the bottom of my bag, forgotten, until the news of her apology started spreading. People were beginning to ask questions. They wanted proof. They wanted the truth. That night, I pulled the flash drive out and stared at it under the dull motel light. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The folders opened instantly, filled with every ugly secret Kendra had tried to bury: false invoices, fake sponsor deals, conversations bragging about manipulating fans. The worst part was the tone of her messages. She didn't just scam strangers, she enjoyed it. She thought it made her powerful. I sat there, scrolling through evidence, torn between anger and hesitation. I didn't want to ruin her life completely. But then, I thought about that night in the rain, about how they'd looked at me like I was nothing, about how my mother stood by and said nothing while her stepdaughter called me a thief. They had thrown me out to protect Kendra's lies. Maybe it was time those lies came back to haunt them. Instead of posting it myself, I sent everything anonymously to an online journalist who specialized in exposing influencer scams. I didn't give names, just documents. I wanted the facts to speak for themselves. Then, I shut my laptop and went to bed, heart pounding. By the next morning, the story had exploded. Headline after headline. Influencer Kendra Lang accused of defrauding fans. Evidence leaked of online scam, family connection revealed. The internet that once adored her now tore her apart. Brands pulled out of deals. Her accounts went private. Her followers dropped by the thousands. I watched it unfold in silence. My inbox filled with messages from people thanking me for standing up against toxic families, though they didn't even know the half of it. I didn't respond, not yet. Then, late in the evening, a new sound filled the motel room: a knock on the door. My heart stopped. No one knew where I was staying. I froze, waiting. Another knock, louder this time. "Brianna?" It was my mother's voice, muffled but unmistakable. I didn't answer. I couldn't. How did she even find me? She knocked again. "Please. We need to talk. They're saying Kendra could be arrested. Please open the door." I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my flash drive like a weapon, my heart racing. Every instinct told me to stay silent. Because deep down, I knew the moment I opened that door, Justice would no longer be just an idea, it would be standing right in front of me. Watching justice unfold from my motel room felt surreal. I didn't open the door that night. I couldn't. I just sat there, motionless, listening to my mother's voice fade down the hallway. Part of me wanted to let her in, to ask why she'd only come now that their world was crumbling. But another part, the stronger part, knew better. Every time I'd trusted her, I ended up bleeding emotionally. This time, I stayed quiet. When morning came, my phone was overflowing with messages. News outlets had picked up the story, and Kendra's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Influencer expose channels were tearing apart her brand, replaying clips of her fake apologies, analyzing her every word. People she'd scammed were coming forward, showing proof of their losses, screenshots, payment receipts, angry DMs. My family's perfect image was now synonymous with lies and fraud. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who called me a thief were now being investigated for real theft. Life has a way of balancing the scales, even if it takes time. I made coffee with the motel's rusty little machine and sat by the window, watching cars pass by. The world outside looked the same, but mine had completely changed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. The truth had finally spoken for me. My email pinged with a message from a morning talk show inviting me to share my inspirational story. I stared at the screen for a long time, tempted not for fame, but for closure. Still, I declined. I didn't want to be known for what they'd done to me. I wanted to be known for what I was building. So I poured all my energy into Lunarize designs. Orders were coming in faster than I could handle. I hired 2 virtual assistants, both women who had written to me saying my video inspired them to start over after abusive relationships. I didn't tell them my story. I didn't have to. They understood pain, and that was enough. Together, we grew faster than I'd ever imagined. A week later, my mother emailed me. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." My heart sank before I even opened it. Her message was long, rambling, and full of excuses how she was blinded by love for Kendra, how she didn't mean to choose sides. She said she missed me, that she was proud of the woman I'd become. I wanted to believe her, but every sentence felt rehearsed, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I didn't reply. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, torn between guilt and peace. For years, I'd prayed she'd apologize. Now that she had, it didn't mean anything. Words without change are just noise, and I'd had enough noise for a lifetime. The following morning, a knock came at my door again. My stomach flipped, thinking it might be her, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed officers. My heart nearly stopped. I opened the door hesitantly. "Are you Brianna Lang?" one of them asked. "Yes. We're not here about you," the other officer said quickly, sensing my fear. "We just wanted to inform you that an investigation into your stepsister's activities has officially begun. You might be contacted for a statement since your name was associated with her business accounts." I nodded numbly, thanking them. When they left, I sat on the bed, the silence deafening. Kendra's downfall was no longer an online scandal. It was real, legal, and irreversible. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, like revenge had burned too hot and left ashes where my heart used to be. I'd gotten the justice I wanted, but not the peace I needed. Then, just as I was beginning to settle into my new rhythm, another envelope slid under my motel door. Thick paper, my name written in perfect cursive ink. When I opened it and saw the lawyer's letterhead, I knew my past was about to find me again, but this time, not in the way I expected. The letter came from a lawyer and it had my name in bold on the envelope. For a moment, I thought it was connected to Kendra's investigation. Maybe another legal tangle dragging me into her mess. My fingers trembled as I opened it, expecting trouble. But instead, the words inside left me speechless. It wasn't about Kendra, it was about my grandmother, and she was gone. I hadn't seen Grandma Elsie in over a year. My mother always found a reason to keep me from visiting her. She said Grandma was too frail, too confused, too tired for company. I'd believed her. Now I realized she'd been keeping us apart on purpose. The letter stated that Grandma had passed away peacefully 2 months earlier and that I, not my mother, was listed as the sole heir to her estate, her house, her savings, everything she had left. I read it 3 times, the words blurring through tears. Grandma had always been the one person who saw me, who treated me like I mattered. When I was little, she'd tell me stories about strong women who rebuilt their lives from nothing. She used to squeeze my hand and whisper, "One day, Brianna, they'll see your light, but don't wait for them to notice it. Shine anyway." I spent the rest of the day in silence, processing it all. Part of me wanted to celebrate this gift, this chance at a new beginning, but another part ached with guilt. Grandma had passed away, and I hadn't even known. My mother hadn't told me. She'd let me believe Grandma was still alive while her funeral had already come and gone. The lawyer's letter included details about the property, the small house on Willow Creek Road, the same one I'd spent countless summers in as a kid. My heart twisted at the thought of that place, the scent of cinnamon rolls, the floral curtains, the creaky old swing in the backyard. That house had been my escape when home became unbearable. 2 days later, I drove there. The closer I got, the heavier my chest felt. The streets looked the same, quiet, lined with maples shedding orange leaves. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my throat tightened. The paint on the porch was chipped, the windows dusty, but it still felt warm, familiar, safe. I unlocked the door with the key the lawyer had mailed me. The air inside smelled faintly of lavender and something sweet, like time itself had been holding its breath. Dust danced in the light, filtering through the curtains. I walked through each room slowly, memories flooding back, baking cookies, playing board games, listening to Grandma hum old songs while she knit sweaters I never got to wear. Then I noticed something strange. On the kitchen counter sat an old picture frame, one I remembered vividly. It was me and Grandma, smiling on that same porch, arms around each other. Behind it was a folded note in her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. It was short, written with her usual graceful loops. "My dear Brianna, I know you've carried pain that wasn't yours to bear. This home is your new beginning. Don't let anyone take your peace again. Grandma." Tears streamed down my face as I read it again and again. Somehow, she knew. She must have seen what my mother had done to me, even if I never said a word. I spent the night there, curled up in Grandma's old armchair, surrounded by silence that felt more comforting than lonely. I promised myself I'd restore this house, make it what it used to be, a place of love, not judgment. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, a motion light flickered outside. I got up, peered through the window, and froze. At the end of the driveway, half hidden by the shadows, stood my mother watching me. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling, but I didn't know if it was guilt or just fear. My mother stood there at the end of the driveway, clutching her purse like she was holding on to the last bit of stability she had left. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The wind rustled the maple trees, scattering leaves between us like fragments of everything we'd broken. Finally, I stepped off the porch. "What are you doing here, Mom?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. She took a shaky step forward. I didn't know where else to go," she said. "I heard you got the house." Her words hit me like a cold splash of water. So she knew. I shouldn't have been surprised, news traveled fast in small towns. But there was something about the way she said it. Like she wasn't congratulating me but asking for something. "I just needed to see you," she continued. "Everything's gone, Brianna. The house, the accounts. Kendra's a mess. She's been questioned by the police. I don't even know what to do anymore." I crossed my arms. "You could start by apologizing for what you did." Tears welled in her eyes. But I couldn't tell if they were real or part of the performance she'd perfected over the years. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I should have believed you. I shouldn't have thrown you out." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the memory of standing in that rain, watching her turn her back on me, was burned too deeply to forget. "You didn't just throw me out, Mom," I said quietly. "You made me feel like I didn't matter." Her lip quivered. I was scared, Brianna. Kendra lied. But she was my baby. I thought I was protecting her. I shook my head. No. You were protecting your comfort. You didn't want to believe your perfect little family could be broken, so you broke me instead. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. You sound just like your grandmother. Something in that sentence softened me, not completely, but enough to listen. I sighed, rubbing my temples. You can come inside for a bit, I said finally. Just for tonight. Her eyes widened. Really? Don't make me regret it, I said, turning toward the porch. Inside, the house felt heavier with her presence. She glanced around like she was walking through a museum of her past. I haven't been here since Mom's funeral, she murmured. I bit my tongue. The thought that she'd attended Grandma's funeral without even telling me made my stomach twist. I made us tea and set it on the table between us. She talked about Kendra's arrest, about losing her job, about how everyone in town had turned against her. I listened, though every word scraped old wounds raw. She claimed she had nowhere else to go. The words hung in the air like smoke. That night, I let her sleep in the guest room. Before I went to bed, I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. She looked smaller, somehow fragile, almost childlike. A part of me pitied her. But another part whispered, don't forget what she's capable of. I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards set my nerves on edge. Old instincts, the kind you develop when you've lived under emotional warfare, wouldn't let me relax. When the first light of dawn crept through the window, I got up, hoping to distract myself by making coffee. But the kitchen counter was empty. My laptop, the one I used for my business, was gone. Panic surged through me. I ran to the guest room. The bed was empty. The sheets tossed aside. My mother's purse, coat, and shoes were gone too. I checked every room, calling her name, though deep down I already knew she wasn't going to answer. My heart pounded as I searched the house, every step heavier with betrayal. When I looked out the window, her car was gone from the driveway. And that's when the reality hit me. She hadn't come for forgiveness. She'd come to take something from me. Again. My chest went cold. She'd stolen from me again. I stood frozen in the middle of Grandma's kitchen. The silence deafening except for the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. My laptop was everything, my business, my income, my future. Without it, I was back to nothing. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space on the counter, unable to process what she'd done. Then anger started to burn through the shock. How could she? After everything, after all the tears, the apologies, the begging, she'd done it again. I tore through the house, hoping maybe she'd just moved it somewhere, but it was gone. My bag sat open near the couch, rifled through. I checked my jewelry box, my wallet, even the drawer where I kept petty cash. A few bills were missing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me who I was dealing with. She hadn't changed. She'd just gotten more desperate. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what you think you're doing, but that laptop isn't just a thing, it's my job, my life. Please bring it back before you make this worse. I hung up, knowing she wouldn't. For a few seconds I stood in the doorway, trying to breathe through the rage clawing at my chest. Then I remembered something, the GPS tracking app I'd installed on my laptop months ago after an online customer scam. My heart pounded as I opened the app. There it was, a blinking blue dot moving through town. My mother's car. I grabbed my keys and ran outside, not even bothering to lock the door. The drive into town felt endless. Every red light testing my patience. The signal finally stopped near a pawn shop on the corner of Main and Larch. I parked hastily and rushed inside. The man behind the counter looked up with mild annoyance. Can I help you? I took a deep breath. Someone just brought in a silver laptop, probably within the last hour. I can prove it's mine. He hesitated, then glanced at the back room. We did get one in recently, he admitted. Older lady, maybe late 50s? Said it was hers, needed cash fast. My heart sank. That's her, I whispered. He nodded toward a shelf behind him where my laptop sat, tagged and priced. My logo sticker lunarized designs gleamed under the fluorescent light. It felt surreal, seeing my livelihood treated like a second-hand toy. I can show you proof of ownership, I said quickly, pulling up receipts, screenshots, serial numbers, anything I could find. The man looked them over, then sighed. Yeah. It's definitely yours, he said. But since it's already logged in the system, I need to mark it as recovered property. You can take it, but I'll need your signature. Relief and fury collided in my chest. As I signed the paper, I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. This wasn't about the laptop anymore. It was about her. My own mother had sold my dream for a few $100s. When I got back to the car, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, trembling. Every part of me wanted to scream, to drive to wherever she was and demand to know why. But I already knew. My mother wasn't capable of loving anyone unless it benefited her. I'd been her backup plan, her emotional ATM, her scapegoat, never her daughter. That night, I blocked her number for good. I deleted every old message, every photo. The door was finally closed. But as I was cleaning the house later, something caught my eye on the kitchen table, an envelope I hadn't noticed before. My name was written across it in her handwriting. My stomach twisted. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting another manipulation attempt. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The first line stopped me cold. I'm sorry, Brianna. You deserve to know the truth. And what I read next would change everything I thought I knew about her and about myself. Inside, a crumpled envelope left on the kitchen table was a confession I never expected to read. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, my mother's handwriting slanting unevenly across the page, messy, rushed, emotional. The kind of handwriting that came from guilt rather than habit. The first sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. I didn't want to lose you the way I lost myself. I sank into the nearest chair, reading each line as the air in the room grew heavier. She wrote about things I'd never known: how she'd started struggling with anxiety and depression after my father died, how Roger had swooped in when she was vulnerable, promising to take care of us. He made me feel safe, she wrote, but I didn't see how he slowly isolated me, how he made me believe Kendra was the only one who loved me. She said Roger encouraged her to favor Kendra, told her I was too independent, that I'd never be loyal like his daughter. I believed him, the letter continued. Every time you stood up for yourself, he told me you were being disrespectful. I wanted peace, so I punished you instead. I felt anger, sorrow, and confusion all at once. I remembered the nights Roger would make little digs at me, calling me ungrateful, lazy, or too proud. I'd always thought my mother didn't care enough to defend me, but now I saw it differently. She'd been manipulated, molded into someone I barely recognized. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but for the first time, I understood why she'd chosen lies over love. She went on to admit that she'd kept Grandma's illness a secret because she was ashamed. She told me she wanted you to have the house, the letter said. I was angry. I felt like she was choosing you over me. I thought if I kept you apart, she'd change her mind. I didn't realize she'd already written the will. Tears rolled down my cheeks, blurring the words. My throat ached. When you left that night, she wrote, I thought I'd taught you a lesson. I thought you'd come back begging for forgiveness, and I'd have control again. But when your video went viral, when I saw what you'd built, I realized I'd spent years trying to destroy the one person who was most like my mother, the one person I should have been proud of. By the end of the letter, her words became shaky, scattered. I sold your laptop because I didn't know how else to reach you. I thought if you came after me, we could talk. But I see now that I've already taken too much. I can't undo what I've done, but I hope someday you'll understand that I was never angry at you, I was angry at myself. There was no signature, just one last line written at the bottom in smaller, trembling handwriting. Please don't hate me forever. I sat there for a long time, the paper crumpled between my fingers. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to throw the letter in the fireplace and watch the ashes rise. But something inside me softened instead. Maybe forgiveness didn't mean letting her back into my life. Maybe it just meant freeing myself from the weight she'd left on me. That night, I stepped outside onto Grandma's porch. The air was crisp, the sky bruised with twilight. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without anger sitting in my lungs. I decided to stay in the house, to make it mine again. Over the next few weeks, I painted walls, cleaned out rooms, and filled the silence with music. Neighbors stopped by, offering help and sharing stories about Grandma. Each small kindness stitched another piece of me back together. But just as I started to believe I could finally move forward, a car pulled up in front of the house one evening. I wiped the paint off my hands and looked out the window. And when I saw who stepped out of the car, my heart dropped because it was Kendra. Kendra looked nothing like the arrogant influencer I used to know. She was broken. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her eyes red and puffy like she hadn't slept in days. She stood by the car for a moment, clutching her phone like it was her only lifeline. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The last time I saw her face, it was in that viral photo, smug, triumphant, watching my life being thrown away. Now, she looked like someone who'd lost everything. I stepped outside, the porch creaking beneath my feet. "What are you doing here, Kendra?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated before walking toward me. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom won't talk to me. Roger kicked me out. Everyone online hates me. I've got no one, Bree." I crossed my arms, trying to steady my breathing. "You didn't have to come here." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know. I needed to say I'm sorry." For a second, I almost laughed. "Sorry?" I repeated. "You ruined my life, Kendra. You lied, you manipulated, you made everyone think I was a thief, and now you're sorry because it finally caught up with you?" "You're right. I was horrible. I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until everything fell apart. I thought Mom loved me more, that I had to keep her attention somehow. Every time she compared us, I got scared I'd lose her. So I made sure you looked worse than me." Her honesty stunned me. It wasn't the justification I expected, it was raw, ugly truth. "I was jealous," she whispered. "You worked hard for everything. People actually liked you. I wanted that, but I didn't know how to earn it. So I took the shortcut. I lied. I cheated. And when I saw your video, I panicked. I thought you'd expose me." I looked at her, unsure what to say. She was still the girl who'd destroyed my life. But she was also the girl standing on my porch now, stripped of the arrogance that once defined her. "Kendra," I said quietly, "I don't know if I can forgive you. What you did. I don't expect you to," she interrupted, wiping her face. "I just wanted to tell you the truth before it's too late." Something about the way she said that made me uneasy. "What do you mean, too late?" She looked away. "The police have been questioning me again. They said some of my victims are pressing charges. I could be facing real jail time." I felt a twinge of pity despite everything. "So, what do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said softly. "I just wanted to see you one last time. To tell you that you were right. About everything." For a long moment, we just stood there, the wind rustling between us. Then I went inside, grabbed a small paper bag and handed it to her. Inside were sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of water. "Here," I said. "You can't fix everything on an empty stomach." Her lips trembled. You're still kind, even after all this." I shrugged. "Kind doesn't mean stupid. Don't come here again." She nodded, tears spilling again. "You remind me of Grandma," she whispered. "She always said you had her heart." She walked back to her car and drove off slowly, taillights fading into the night. I stood on the porch long after she was gone, the echo of her words replaying in my mind. "You remind me of Grandma." For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, just exhaustion. It was over. At least, that's what I thought. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm. "Official. This is Detective Harris. Are you Brianna Lang?" My stomach clenched. "Yes. Why?" He sighed and said, "It's about your stepsister, Kendra. She's been arrested and she asked for you." The call was from a detective and Kendra had been arrested. My heart pounded as I held the phone against my ear, trying to process his words. Detective Harris spoke gently, his tone steady and professional. "She turned herself in last night," he said. "She gave a full statement. We thought you should know since your name came up several times." I swallowed hard. "My name? Why?" "She told us you weren't involved in any of her business activities. In fact, she said you tried to warn her. She wanted that on record." For a moment, I couldn't speak. After everything, the lies, the cruelty, the betrayal, she'd finally told the truth. "Is she okay?" I asked hesitantly. "She's cooperating," he said. "She asked if we could tell you she's sorry. That's all she wanted to say." When the call ended, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the floor. I'd imagined so many scenarios for how this story might end: shouting, blame, maybe even revenge, but not this. Not Kendra taking responsibility. Not her protecting me when she had every reason not to. The following days passed in a blur. News outlets picked up the story again, this time painting Kendra as the fallen influencer seeking redemption. Most people didn't buy it, but I didn't care about public opinion anymore. I just hoped she meant what she said. A week later, I got another call, this time from her public defender. He said Kendra wanted to see me before her court date. Every instinct screamed no. But something deeper urged me to go. Closure, maybe. Understanding. I didn't know. When I arrived at the station, they led me into a small, gray interview room. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and cheap coffee. Kendra sat on the other side of the table, wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked too big for her. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes tired but clear. For the first time, she looked real, stripped of filters, makeup, and pretenses. "Hey," I said softly as I sat down. She managed a small smile. "Hey, thanks for coming. I wasn't sure I should. I wouldn't have blamed you if you didn't." She paused, then leaned forward slightly. "I told them everything. About the scams, about the fake giveaways, about how I blamed you to cover my tracks. I told them you had nothing to do with any of it." "I heard," I said. The detective called. She nodded. "Good. I wanted you to hear it from me too. I don't expect forgiveness, Brianna. I just wanted to make things right before I can't." Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment, she looked like the scared teenager I once met when our parents married. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her I forgave her, but the words wouldn't come. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a process, one I was still walking through. Instead, I said, quietly, "I hope you use this time to figure out who you really are, Kendra. Not the person you pretend to be online, the person you hide from." Tears filled her eyes. "I think I already am." We sat in silence for a long time, and for once, it wasn't uncomfortable. When the guard finally came to take her back, she stood, gave me a small nod, and whispered, "Thank you." As I left the station, the cold wind hit my face, and I felt something shift inside me, not joy, not relief, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally letting go of what's been holding you down. In the weeks that followed, I poured my focus into Luna Rise designs again. Orders kept growing, but more importantly, my story began to inspire others. I started a new online series called Rising Again, a space where women could share their own stories of betrayal, survival, and healing. The messages flooded in stories of mothers, sisters, friends, all reclaiming their worth. Sometimes I'd read those messages late at night and think about Kendra, hoping she'd find her own light one day. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of my past. I felt like someone who had survived it and turned it into something meaningful. But just when I thought the last chapter of this story had been written, something in Grandma's attic would prove there was one final truth waiting to be uncovered. Hidden under a floorboard was a box labeled with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. I found it one rainy afternoon while cleaning out the attic. The space smelled of cedar and dust, filled with old trunks, quilts, and memories too heavy to carry. I'd been planning to clear it out for months, but something in me had always hesitated, like the attic was waiting for me to be ready. And maybe it was. When I pried up the loose board near the window, My fingers brushed against something solid. It was a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. My name, Brianna, was written across the lid in Grandma's familiar looping script. My breath caught. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the rain tapping softly against the roof, and lifted the lid. Inside were old letters, yellowed photographs, and a small leather-bound journal. The sight of it made my throat tighten. The letters were addressed to me written years ago, though she'd never mailed them. I picked one up carefully, afraid it might crumble in my hands. The first line read, "If you're reading this, sweetheart, then I'm not around to tell you these things myself." I swallowed hard and kept reading. She wrote about my childhood, how proud she was of me, how she'd always known I was destined for something bigger than that small, stifling town. "You remind me of myself," she said. "But stronger. You love deeply, and that's both your gift and your weakness. Don't let anyone use it against you." Each letter peeled back layers of love I hadn't known I was still craving. She talked about my mother too, how she'd seen her slipping away, becoming colder after marrying Roger. "I tried to help her," she wrote, "but she resented that I still cared for you. She thought loving you meant losing her." It broke my heart to see her turn away from both of us. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Grandma had known everything, the tension, the favoritism, the way I was made to feel small. "That's why I'm leaving this house to you," she wrote in one letter. "It's more than a home, it's protection. It's proof that you are worthy of something that is yours, untouched by anyone's greed or guilt." Tears blurred the ink as I read those words. I'd spent so long trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it, not realizing that someone already had. Grandma had believed in me completely enough to plan for my healing even after she was gone. The journal at the bottom of the box was the most precious thing of all. Its cover was cracked, its pages filled with sketches of the house, pressed flowers, recipes, and small notes of wisdom. On the last page, she'd written, "When you find this, build something beautiful again for yourself. And for others who've been broken." I closed the book and sat in silence, the weight of her words anchoring me in the best way. She'd given me not just a home, but a mission. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a survivor, I felt like a continuation of her strength. That night, I went through every photo in the box, pictures of us laughing in the garden, baking together, sitting by the window watching the rain. I could almost hear her humming, smell her cinnamon perfume. For the first time in years, the memories didn't hurt. They healed. I knew what I had to do next. This house wasn't meant to be a hiding place anymore. It was meant to be alive again, a sanctuary, a space for others who'd been tossed aside the way I once was. I could see it clearly in my mind: workshops, support groups, art classes, a place for women to rebuild themselves from the ashes. As I packed the box carefully and set it back in the attic, I whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. I finally understand." And as I closed that journal, I knew exactly what I needed to do next: turn my pain into purpose. Just like she taught me. I turned my pain into purpose, and the world was finally listening. After finding Grandma's letters, something inside me shifted completely. The bitterness I'd carried for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet strength I didn't even know I had. I finally understood what Grandma meant when she wrote about building something beautiful again. I wasn't meant to hide behind my past. I was meant to use it. Within a few months, I transformed the old house into something entirely new, a sanctuary called the Willow Home. What used to be Grandma's living room became a warm, welcoming space filled with soft light, bookshelves, and handmade art. I reached out to local women's shelters, small business owners, and online communities, offering workshops on creative healing and entrepreneurship. The same online following that had once watched my pain unfold now became a network of support. Orders for lunarized designs grew, but more importantly, my platform became a voice for others like me, women who'd been discarded, overlooked, or underestimated. The day we opened the Willow Home, the small town buzzed with curiosity. Neighbors who had once whispered about my family drama showed up with flowers, baked goods, and shy smiles. They'd seen the viral posts, the headlines, the mess, but now they were seeing the rebirth. I stood in front of the little porch, ribbon scissors in hand, and whispered under my breath, "This one's for you, Grandma." Life didn't suddenly become perfect, healing never is. There were still nights I'd wake up from dreams of that rainy evening, heart racing, hearing my mother's voice in the dark. But every morning, I reminded myself that pain was the seed that grew everything I had now. The first real moment of peace came months later, when I received a letter from the correctional facility where Kendra was serving her short sentence. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a single sentence: "I'm learning how to be real again. Thank you for letting me start over, even from here." I didn't cry this time. Instead, I smiled a real, full smile. People change in unexpected ways. Maybe she never would have found humility without losing everything. Maybe none of us would have. A few weeks after that, I finally visited my mother. I didn't plan to, it just happened. She was living in a small rented apartment on the edge of town, and when she opened the door, she looked older, quieter. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then she said softly, "You look like her." "Grandma?" I asked. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I see her every time you walk into a room." We talked for hours. Not about the past, not really, but about small things. About the weather, the garden she missed, the silence in the house since I left. I didn't promise reconciliation, but I promised honesty, and that was enough. As I left, she hugged me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I used to dream of. But it was real. When I got home, I walked through the rooms of the Willow home. Women were laughing in the kitchen, crafting jewelry, sharing stories over cups of tea. I felt Grandma's presence everywhere, in the warmth, in the laughter, in the sound of healing quietly blooming again. That night, I sat by my window with my laptop, filming another video for my growing audience. I looked into the camera and smiled, my heart steady and full. "A few years ago," I began, "I thought being thrown away meant I was worthless. But sometimes, being discarded just means you're being set free, free to grow into who you were always meant to be." I paused, the reflection of the house lights soft behind me. "And if you've ever been tossed aside by people who were supposed to love you, remember this. Their rejection doesn't define your value, your resilience does." The comment section filled with hearts and thank yous within minutes, but I didn't stay to read them. I closed the laptop, stepped onto the porch, and looked up at the night sky. The wind carried the faint scent of lavender, Grandma's scent. I smiled, whispering into the dark, "We did it." Because in the end, they did regret it all, and I finally learned what it means to love myself completely.